Will you pray with me? Holy One, may the words of my lips and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, because you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Wormwood and gall, says the lamenter. The thought of my homelessness and my affliction is wormwood and gall, says the lamenter, sitting there in the rubble of the great city of Jerusalem. The city that was the center of the faith, the center of the nation, that people in later generations would call the center of the universe. And it was in rubble. The palaces, the hovels, the shops, the streets, and even the great temple itself had been razed to the ground. The leaders of the nation had mismanaged things. People from far nations had come in and done their part, and the whole project had fallen apart, and the people lay dead in the streets. And the ones that weren't dead, they were deported to far Babylon, where by its waters they sat them down and wept. So in the psalm that the choir heard, you heard the choir sing today, Psalm 137, you hear the people who had been sent into exile when their city and their nation was destroyed, and they sat there by those waters and cried. And in today's book of Lamentations, you hear the lamentation of someone who was left behind, who's surrounded by the bodies and the rocks and the destructions. Wormwood and gall, the lamenter says. It was 587 that it all came crashing down. 587 B.C. when that temple, when that center of everything was destroyed. And there the person sat. But here's what that lamenter knew. That God is faithful. That God's mercies are renewed day by day, morning by morning, and that destruction is never the end. That in fact it is the entire project of God to pull buildings out of rubble, to pull life out of death, to pull love out of hatred, to pull togetherness out of loneliness. And so, though it tasted like wormwood and gall, the person said, but these things I will call to mind. Through clenched teeth, the lamenter called to mind the mercies of God and all the things that God had done down through the years to save the people. And that person, that lamenter sitting there in the rubble, refused to despair. But the lamenter was wrong about something. They said, it is good to wait on the mercies of God. And if you mean that metaphorically, sure, it's good to wait on God's mercy. But if you take it literally, it's a bit of a problem. And that's what the exiles knew. Those ones weeping by the waters of Babylon, they did not sit and wait. They went to the powers that be and they said, we have to go home. We have to help. We have to rebuild. They did it for generation after generation until finally the powers there in that far land, they gave them permission and they sent them home to rebuild. It wasn't the people that first went. It was their children's children. But still they went back and they did not go alone. They came with the oppressor on their heels. The power of the oppressor, the support of the oppressor, sent with them to rebuild together. And there they found the lamenters, having gotten tired of just lamenting. They found them picking up one stone at a time and putting it on another until walls began to rise from the ruins. They did not wait. In the end, they went to work. Wormwood and gall, they might have said in Managua. The taste of my affliction and my homelessness is like wormwood and gall, they might have said there in Managua in the 70s. When the great earthquake roared through that city and brought it to its knees, and aid came flowing in from around the country and from beyond, from countries all around the world, they sent aid. But the Somoza dynasty had been ruling in that country for decade after decade after decade, and all that aid that was sent, that was supposed to rebuild the city, disappeared. and it tasted like wormwood and gall to the people. And so they started a resistance movement, and the Sandinistas were born in the jungles, and they fought until that dynasty fell, and they didn't fight alone. You know this, right? You know who helped them. We did. The Carter administration sent aid of all kinds to the Sandinistas when they came roaring in and took over the government of Nicaragua. And there they ruled for a while, but there were some that tasted like wormwood and gall too, and so the Contras were born. You know, contra is Spanish for against. So the Contras were born in those same jungles and rose up with guns in their hands, and you know who helped them fight the Sandinistas, don't you? We did. Not the Carter administration, the Reagan administration this time sent aid and guns, trained their leaders, taught them what to do, and sent Nicaraguan against Nicaraguan. And they didn't just send it directly, right? You remember this. Some of it went through Iran and then back to Nicaragua, the Iran-Contra affair. You remember that, right? Nicaraguan against Nicaraguan until 30,000 lay dead in the streets and in the jungles or disappeared. And those are just the ones that died in those battles. Thousands upon thousands more left, exiled themselves or their children to try to keep them safe from the violence that was happening at home. And so many of them came here. And then, you know what happened then, right? The churches here, they founded something called the Sanctuary Movement. Plymouth was part of that. We gave sanctuary to those exiles who fled the ruined city, who fled the taste of wormwood and gall, looking for a better life. And when they were in exile here, we listened. We heard what they had to say. They told us the stories of what was going on at home. We listened. They came to the land of their oppressor. The one who had come in just when the leaders were weakest, just when they were making the biggest mistakes, the one who had come in and brought everything to its knees. They came to the land of the oppressor, and by the waters of Onondaga Creek, they sat them down and wept, and we listened. And they said, we have to rebuild. We believe that God's mercies are new every morning, that God's faithfulness is great, but we believe God will not do it alone. We have to rebuild. We need help in Managua. And we listened. And some among us, some in this very room, remembered God's mercies, clenched their teeth, clenched their fists, and said, but these things I will call to mind. God is merciful, and it is my job to be merciful too. And so Chris Hopkins, who remembered God's great mercies, and other people in this very room, they decided that they would go with Nicaraguans, go to Nicaraguans to help rebuild, to hopefully find there, to be sure to find there. People picking up one stone and putting it on another, and another and another, until a city and a nation rises from the ruins. Chris and a team from the New York Conference have already gone once to our partner churches in Nicaragua to help rebuild, to learn, to repair, and that's not enough for her or for us. That's not the end. Another team will be going this winter. You can learn more about that trip after the service, as I said earlier, right in this place. You can find out how you can go, and if you can't be the person that can go, you can find out how you can support the people who will go, because this is true. These things we will call to mind. God's faithfulness is great, and God's mercies are new every morning, but it is not enough to sit around and wait. Say amen.